Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Health Mastery for Leaders, our online live doc show. I am so grateful to have Daniel Aaron with us yet another day. We've interviewed him several times, and in my heart and soul, Daniel is from Maui, so we all know that they're going through some challenging times. And I'm just grateful that he still showed up and he's doing his gift on vibrant healing and all the amazing work that he does with all of the energy and the people that he touches. He's an inspirational author, a speaker, and the best-selling author and CEO of The Art of Vibrant Living, like I just mentioned. And he is helping spiritual people raise their actual vibration, education, and the empowerment company. He helps spiritual people empower their actions around mindset, business, finances, health, emotions, and practice. So who doesn't need that in their life? Because when you're working with him, he's working on you so that you can finally get your physical earthly lives to match up with your vision and your values and your potential. So I just want to welcome Danielle. And I'm just so grateful to have you here again. And thank you for showing up during the difficult times in Maui right now.
Well, thank you, Holly. I appreciate that you are just so tirelessly working to get the message of health and healing and vitality out to people. And I'm honored to be a part of it.
Yes, and Danielle is going to speak to us about breathing for life and vitality. So when I think of that, I have so many conversations with patients where they're not actually breathing consistently enough. We're forgetting to breathe when we're in difficult times. We all kind of tense up and hold everything in and think we're going to protect ourselves. So I'm going to let Daniel take it away. We're going to bounce back and forth, but speak to us about breath, vitality, vibrant living, and what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's breath is one of the most amazing things in that you can literally go through an entire life without ever being conscious of it. Like it'll happen automatically for one's entire life, or at any point one can say, actually, you know what? I'm going to take charge of this. I'm going to direct the breathing right now. And literally, breath is the definition of life, right? If we walk out into the street and we see somebody laying on the ground, and we go to, the first thing we check is, are they breathing, right? And I don't know about you, but in my early education in the home and as well as in school, I got zero education on how to breathe.
Yeah.
And here's what's interesting. So if y'all are with me and you say, okay, well, not breathing equals dead, breathing equals alive, and what we're interested in is life. So we'll leave that aside and say, okay, breathing equals alive. Well, doesn't that just make sense that if we're breathing a little bit, we're going to be a little alive? If we're breathing a lot, we'll be a lot alive. Or if we're breathing poorly, the quality of our life is not going to be what it could be. And if we're breathing well, then we've got an extraordinary life. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And it's interesting that we're having this conversation because I was reading a book this morning and it was talking about, breathing and vitality. And then one of the things that really awakened me in my spirit is somebody's taking their last breath right now.
Yeah.
Think about that. Somebody just took their last breath this second and journeyed to the other side. And the other piece that I want to say about breath as well is I don't know any disease state where you can cure disease with high levels of oxygen. Usually disease is lack of oxygen.
Yeah, absolutely. I did my professional training as a breathwork practitioner way back in the 90s. And one of the required books was Oxygen Healing Therapies. And one of the lines that just screamed out to me from that book is that no disease can survive in a highly oxygenated environment. Right? That's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it just in terms of health, even leaving aside, if you say health is more than just the absence of disease, health is something that's like a level of vitality and joy and energy. What is cellular health? Well, then look at what causes a cell to decay or die. The two main things, the two biggest things, one is a lack of oxygen, and two is auto intoxication, which is a fancy way of saying being stuck in its own refuse, right?
Right.
And what's the major way of detoxifying, getting rid of the cellular refuse? It's through the lymph system. And what's the major way of activating the lymph system? It's breathing. So breath is just so key to cellular health and to the absence of disease.
Yeah, and when I think of like chronic disease, for example, not to, because I want your specialty to shine through here, but really briefly, when I think of chronic disease, for example, prediabetes and diabetes, and we look at hemoglobin A1C as a marker for those that are on, hemoglobin A1C, hemoglobin's function is to bring oxygen to the tissues, right? When hemoglobin A1C's percentage starts to increase, that means glucose molecules are attaching to your hemoglobin. So guess what? That's not going to knock off an oxygen. You're going to have less oxygen being able to bind to hemoglobin to keep the cellular tissue alive with the oxygen, because you got to get sugar out of your body. And so this conversation goes back to the fact that, like, when we're not eating a high quality diet, when we're eating like sugars and starches, which you all hear me talk about consistently, like the overabundance of it, then exactly what Daniel's speaking, and he's going to speak on a higher level of vibrancy spiritually. But in my world, it's like, holy cow, you have prediabetes, I'm scared for you. You have diabetes, I'm scared for you. It's just not okay, because your cells are becoming chronically inflamed and they're not getting the oxygen they need.
Yeah, it's powerful. Really powerful. Breathing, well, and you mentioned the spiritual level of it, and you mentioned a moment ago about that realization, which is important for all of us, that somebody's taking their last breath right now. And I love words, I love language, and here's one of the interesting things we can take about breath, which is like, and I speak about breath and I work with people on breath on the physical level, on an emotional level, and on a spiritual level. We've spoken a little bit about the physical level. And on the spiritual level, though, part of what's fascinating about this is we all know the feeling of what it's like to be inspired, right? And when we are inspired, we have infinite energy. And whether it's a project or a new romance or something that is inspiring us, then it doesn't matter if we eat or we sleep, we have just this infinite energy for whatever that thing is. But then if you look at the word and say, well, what does the word inspire mean, right? It means to breathe in, right? And then in the Spanish language, inspira is inhale, and the exhale, the word for that is expira, which in English is like to expire. So literally, we are recreating our life with every breath. Each inhale is like a new life, and each exhale is like a death in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the last thing I'll say about that, what's a very cool linguistic parallel too, is, well, what else does inspira mean, or what does it mean to be inspired? It's the bringing in of spirit, right? When we bring, and spirit is the animating force. Without that, then this is a corpse. So the spirit is what animates the body. It's what gives us life, and I joke about it sometimes and say I work with spiritual people. Well, that's pretty silly, because everybody's spiritual. If you're alive and you're breathing, you are spiritual.
Yeah, 100%. And what's coming up for me is you're talking about breathing, like as I take a deep breath, so many people forget to breathe every single day. Or, like this month is all mental wellness, which we talked about in anxiety. Like, what is the first thing people do when they're anxious? It's like, it's like they can't inspire and they can't expire because there's so much like living in their heads. So, if you could kind of take a spin off of anxiety with what you do, like, what would that look like for people?
Well, yeah, thank you, and you're absolutely right. It's the fastest way to change our state,
Mm,
and it's like that reflexological wisdom that we can see in so many different ways in our face, right? If we have an upset face, well, we start to feel upset, and our face is a reflection of how we're feeling, but it's also a way of changing how we're feeling. That's
yeah.
scientifically documented. If we smile, then we start to change our chemical consistency. We start to change how we feel. So it's the same thing with the breath, just even more powerfully. And there are breathing patterns that go with every kind of emotional state, right? So yeah, if we are in anxiety, if we're in some kind of severe fear, if we have low energy, these are things that we can change with our breathing. And the thing I point to most often with this is the wisdom of the Greek philosopher Archilochus, who said, "We don't rise to the level of our expectations, we sink to the level of our training." And we could talk for half an hour about why people breathe below their capacity, and it's fascinating and really interesting. Though we could skip over that for the moment and say, yeah, most people breathe way below their capacity, and they tend to breathe automatically, and literally they tend to breathe as little as possible. So when people come to me for a breath workshop or a private session with breathing, one of the things I always say is, look, I don't know exactly what your experience will be here. I know that it tends to be incredibly powerful for people to do this kind of breathing. What I do know, though, is you'll get your money's worth because you'll be more aware of your breathing, and your breathing will be healthier just from doing this practice. And it's so worthwhile, so important to build into one's life practices for breathing that actually create our baseline of breath to be stronger, more conscious, and more vital.
Yeah, and speak about how, I mean, you and I know, but if you could speak about how that helps with our vibrant, like how does that help with our vibrancy? And when you're teaching somebody how to breathe, like maybe some examples of what they experience. And I know, like you and I know that everybody's experience is going to be different when we're changing the state they're in and taking them to another state, whether it's through food, whether it's through the work that we're doing, the healing. So if you could speak a little bit into that, because sometimes people are like, well, it's just like your breath. Like, what do you mean I'm going to have this like great experience or I'm going to feel so much better? Like, there's just not that understanding, I don't think.
Well, sure. Let me. I'll take a shot at responding to that and see if I get to what you're asking. Let me know. One of the things that I speak about often, and when I'm training people on how to breathe better, I say, here's an interesting experiment. Just become an observer of breath, right? Don't do it in a creepy way, but become a stalker so that you're watching how people breathe. And what we find is when people are not physically active, when they're in a resting state and they're, watching a movie or reading a book or something, you watch what most people do is they breathe and their breath gets smaller and slows down until they're about to pass out, and then they take a big breath in and they kind of start the cycle over again.
So
And again, that's a reflection of our subconscious beliefs around breathing, and the subconscious conclusion that we should breathe as little as possible, right? So if we start training and practicing different ways of breathing, and that can be as simple as like the classic box breath: breathe in for X count, hold it for X count, exhale for X count, pause for X count, right? And just keeping that simple. That alone, doing a few minutes of that in the middle of the day, in the first thing in the morning, at any point when somebody's feeling like their energy's dropping, or they're feeling tense, or they're, too caught in their head, really powerful. And that's so simple, so easy. Anybody can do that. Um, so, it's really a matter of going back to what I said in the beginning, that, yeah, we can ignore our breath, right? And we'll subconsciously, unconsciously, we'll keep breathing. However, what a miracle that at any point we could say, oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to take a bigger breath. Right now, I'm going to take a bigger breath. I'm going to hold my breath for a moment and just experience the benefits and the effects of that, right? So being able to become conscious of it and direct it and practice with it is huge.
Yeah, and the more, like Danielle's saying, the more you are involved in your breathing, the more you're involved in your way of being. Can you speak into that? Because most people look for the external environment to speak to them. Whereas if we're connecting and aware of what we're doing in the parasympathetic state, then we're more grounded in our being.
Yeah, nicely said. Well, and we live in a culture right now where we are so bombarded by information, by marketing, by um, panic in some ways, by messages that things are not okay, that there's danger around us, right? And there is a biological part of us, a 2 billion-year-old brain, that it's always scanning the world for danger, right? And that's okay. Yet we all have this capacity to become more invested in the quality of our life via the quality of our breath. And absolutely, just by slowing down our breath and being conscious of it, well, we start to shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic, from the usual beta brain, busy, active, stress, which is really just a notch below fight or flight, panic, to a alpha state or a calmer state, which, as you know well, I'm sure you speak about all the time, has a host of benefits for the biological self.
Yes, exactly. And when you're in that parasympathetic state, so many people they just feel uncomfortable there. Many people, if they haven't done the training like Danielle's doing, and the training with the spirituality and connecting to your being, you're uncomfortable if you sit still, or you're uncomfortable if you're just going to do breath work. Or how many people, like, I'm sure you, because of all your experience that you've had in the areas in the businesses that you've owned, I'm sure you've taken people through meditations, right? And how many people are like, I can't shut my mind off. I can't stop. I can't breathe. My mind never shuts off. And what I want to say to you is, our mind is not meant to shut off, but like what Daniel's saying, it's slowing it down and being in that parasympathetic state. So, really like slowing that energy down and then stepping into your breath work and being more connected to who you are is what I think you're speaking with the vibrancy in the body. What sort of energies will people feel? Like, can you speak a little bit about that? Like, I know, but share that with people as you take them through the breath work.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest selling points, I think, for breath is if I go back to the spiritual, emotional, physical, and we look at just the physical, we know that breath is the measure of life. It's also the major way that we get energy. And I do this in groups often. I say, how do we get energy? Right. And of course, so many of us have been programmed to say, oh, it's from food. Well, maybe, but it depends a lot on what we eat, how much we eat, why we eat, when we eat. And for any of us that hold the illusion that food gives us energy, sometimes, but probably for most people, more often, food takes energy away, right? And anybody that's not sure about that, you think about the the post Thanksgiving coma that is part of our culture, right? So, and then go back to what I said earlier, that most people breathe below their capacity. And, it's different for everybody, and there's no way of measuring this exactly. But conservatively, I'd say probably most people are between a quarter and a third of their capacity for breath. Right? Now, if breath is the major way that we get energy, and this is spoken about through every religious and spiritual tradition, right? The yogis speak about prana. Here in Hawaii, it's mana, right? And whether it's oxygen, breath, there's this common understanding across cultures that breath equals energy.
Mm.
And if we're breathing way below our capacity, that means we have way below the energy that we could have.
Mhm.
And for so many years, I know I look young, but I'm actually 322 years old now. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm 54 years old, and feel like I have tons and tons of energy. I never get to that thing that I hear so much about, which is that mid-afternoon or late afternoon energy slump. Like I don't know what that is from personal experience. And when people ask me about that, when I've thought about it, I said, well, I think it's because I have learned how to breathe better, right? And so when we help somebody to overcome some of the dysfunctional breathing patterns and some of the subconscious blocks to breathing. And if they move just from, say, 1/3 capacity up to 2/3 capacity, right? And 2/3 is nowhere near full capacity, but that move literally is going to be doubling their capacity. It's doubling their energy, doubling their detoxification, doubling their engagement with life, right? That's extremely powerful.
Mhm. Yeah, and I love this. I love this conversation because breath, like we're looking at the external environment, and for those individuals that are always worried and in the financial avenue, it's like breath is free. The key to breath is like being in an environment that's not polluted.
It's so true. It's one of my favorite jokes about breath. And when I lead workshops, and I say, yeah, it's great to go to a workshop. It's great to get some private sessions because you know do 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions with a trained practitioner, because the biggest challenges to our breathing come up in the beginning. But once we've gotten through some of that and we've really learned what a healthy breathing pattern is, and we can do that, this is not the model like the therapeutic model that says, come lay on my sofa every week for the next 10 years and talk about your problems. And by the way, keep paying me all that time. No, breath is so far unregulated by the government and free, right? That means that, yeah, all you really need is the ability to do it, the consciousness to do it. And it certainly does help to have clean air. Absolutely.
And speak a little bit about, or how would you walk somebody through, if this makes sense? If not, we can pivot the question, but how would you walk somebody through when they're in an anxious state and or they can't sleep? Is there a particular breath that you teach or a particular model?
Yeah, and it's a double good question, because there are breathing techniques and technique. I don't even want to use the word technique because that sounds like fancy and complicated, right?
Yeah,
There are
exactly.
breathing patterns that there are ways of breathing that anybody can do that will shift their state, and quickly, like very quickly. So when somebody is in a state of anxiety, and that's often what is associated with insomnia, right? It's like the brain is racing in some way, and whether it's a specific fear or just some nebulous generalized fear, that's what anxiety is.
Mhm.
Then one of the really helpful ways of breathing is just to slow down the exhale, right? So that the inhale, we'll say inhale becomes 2x, the exhale will become 3 or 4x. So in other words, I would breathe in 1, 2, 3, and then breathe out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Just to make the exhale twice as long is good as the inhale. And that already will start to bring the nervous system into a regulation and start to calm the thoughts.
And what about in the opposite way? I'm sure it'd probably be the same, but if there's sadness, depression, that sort of piece, like how is the breath now changing?
Yeah, well, it is opposite in the sense that what we want to do is increase energy coming in. And generally speaking, when I work with a therapeutic style breath session, what we are doing is focusing on the inhale, right? And the way I often speak about it is if we have one breath cycle when we are doing a therapeutic kind of breathing, for the results of emotional release, for increasing energy, for connecting to spirit, then in one breath cycle, 2/3 will be on the inhale and 1/3 will be the exhale. Now, this is an interesting piece because, like, let's go back to what I was saying earlier. If we go to the Spanish language and the linguistic component, inspira is the bringing in of spirit, expira is the expiring or the letting go, right? So if we want to increase our spirit, our health, our energy, our vitality, right? All of which are in some ways antidotes to depression, right? Depression is on some level just a low energy state. Then we need to put some effort into the breath to bring in more spirit. And it does take some effort, right? And I make a lot of jokes about this to help people overcome what one of my colleagues used to call lazy breathing syndrome, right? Because there is a part of all of us that is trying to just keep things the same. That's trying to protect, survive, is afraid of any change, even if it's a change for the better. There's a hardwired survival part of us that's saying, no, 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 no. Let's keep things the way they are. Even if it sucks, even if I'm depressed, I'd rather that than face the unknown. So to counter that, we need to put some energy in, engage a higher part of ourselves, or the spirit part, the invincible part, the part that says life is an adventure and I know there's more for me. And so I'm gonna put some effort into my inhales, and I'm gonna draw more life in. I'm gonna draw more life in. And then with the exhale, I'm just gonna let go. So it's essentially in simpler terms, what you said. It's the opposite of the relaxing or the bringing down of energy kind of breathing that we talked about before.
Now, when you're walking somebody through breath work and, changing their state, increasing their vibrancy, their vitality, are 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 you in the beginning when you're training them, if you walk somebody through, I'll use the word training or inspiring them to breathe, what does that look like? Are you taking them on a journey, like sort of like a voice journey? Do you do music with it, or is there like some sort of silence where you're just encouraging that like true connection to your heart, to your vulnerability, your intimacy of who you are?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. And we are at such an interesting time in our evolution in our culture right now because there are so many kinds of breath work or breath modalities out there,
Yeah.
right? And whether you go from Leonard Orr in the 70s with rebirthing to Stanislav Grof with holotropic breath work, Wim Hof has become very popular these days for the kind of breathing that he teaches and the feats that go with that, and many, many other styles. And basically what's happened is, well, yogis were talking about breath, and other sort of spiritual traditions were talking about breath, long, long time ago. And then in this sort of renaissance of the 60s that created a lot of new modalities, well, a few people started creating these breath modalities. And now many people have put their little spins on them and done their way of doing it and brought it forward in a different way and given it their brand name. So that's all to say that I have a method that I work with, and I learned from a teacher of mine who's actually based in New Hampshire, a woman named Judith Kravitz. And I learned from her back in 1996. The method is called transformational breath, and it's incredibly powerful. And she started with rebirthing with Leonard Orr, and then said, "Well, what if we add some elements here like music, right? And what if we add some physical touch? And if part of the challenge for people with breathing is the subconscious programming around it, what if we bring in some affirmations to help reprogram the breath?" So it is really a journey that includes many different components, including just some intellectual and cognitive education about why we breathe, what can happen, what the benefits are. Because if we get a good understanding of it, then when we actually go into a focused session, we get way more out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always say, like, with my patients, if people understand why they're doing what they're doing, and I think you're saying this, if there's an understanding behind what we're asking them to do, then they're going to get a deeper inner healing.
Yeah, exactly. It's I'm not an art expert, though I studied art enough in college to know that a little bit of art appreciation education makes a huge difference. If I go to a museum and just look and say, "Oh, there's a bunch of pretty paintings," that's one thing. But if I know about the artist and the genre and what their life was and how they fit into the bigger picture of art, and I see a painting, then it's like, wow, I have a whole deeper appreciation of it. And I think it's the same thing about breath or any practice that we might do.
That's like a great example, because it's so true. If there's an awareness and an understanding, and you take people through that healing journey, or like the art, there's more awareness. Where I would say most of the people or patients that come to the clinic, and I don't know if you experience this as well, is they just know they want to feel better, or they know they want to breathe better, or they know they want to have more energy or more finances, whatever that looks like. But they're not really understanding the bigger picture of what that gets to look like or who they get to be in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Nicely said.
So is there anything else that you 100% want to add that is like on your heart about vibrancy and breathing and wellness? And
Well, sure, yes, of course. One general thing is, and excuse me, one second here.
take your time.
I'll bring this conversation back to what you started with and our current situation for us that live here on Maui at the moment. Because there's a lot of people dealing with, we're all dealing with it in different ways. Devastation. For some, it's loss of life. For many, it's loss of poverty. And when we get to like extreme circumstances like that, one of the silver linings is we become more aware of the value of life, the importance of life, right? And silver lining, people's hearts open up, they give to each other, there's a greater level of caring. And it also points to me to say, life is so precious and beautiful. We do well to value it, right? So for people that are in the mode of, it's okay, life's all right, I'm just getting by, nothing really to complain about. It's what I call mediocre monotony, or Simpsons called it the cult of meh, right? And it's like I'm just going through the motions. The thing I say is it doesn't have to be that way, right? There is the possibility not just of the absence of disease, there's the possibility of vitality, vibrancy of a great life. So for anybody that's, can hear in those words, like, yeah, I'm just going through the motions, like, wake up, snap out of it. because we have so many tools that can help you go from here into your best, most vibrant, beautiful life. And not only does that make a huge difference for you and in your life, that's what makes a huge difference in the world. So, I guess the shorter version of that would be, I hope people hear this conversation and say, time to wake up, to not settle for a mediocre life, to instead create the truest, most beautiful life that I can, because you deserve that. And the world deserves you to be living on purpose that way.
I love this conversation. What's coming up for me is two things: is you all have a unique ability. God put you on this earth and there's no other person like you. And so what is that unique ability for you, and what is holding you back to become, everyone's always using the best version of themselves, the healthiest version of their self, your highest spiritual self, whatever that looks like for you. And I encourage everybody that is on right now and or that is listening to this recording with Daniel, like giving his time when there's so much going on around him. Can I encourage you all to stop living comfortably and start really, and I don't mean comfortably as far as your home and your walls and the things that you have, but I mean, take yourself out of your comfort zone. Whether it's working with Daniel and like understanding like breathing, how do I breathe better, or the spirituality piece, or if it's working with me with health, like all of us are showing up so that you get to heal, but stop staying comfortable, because the truth is life is right now. I mean, Maui is in such disruption with fires going through it and people being killed. But why do we have to make, I guess what comes onto my heart that brings tears to my eyes is, why do we have to have devastations that step up as a community? Why can't we step up as a community that God put us on this earth every single day to help one another, instead of living in fear and anxiety that the people that are, I don't know what you want to say, running the country that we're in, like, I have no judgment, but you get to live the life that you get to live. And if you're going to live it comfortably and you're not going to step out of your comfort zone, when you take your last breath, what are your regrets going to be? If you're not living life to your fullest. And I think so many people are living in fear and anxiety and comfortability because of what we just went through. But even like, I was hoping like 9/11 would, it was done. Those of you that were alive through it. And then it was, how much longer? 6 months. We were just back to like a lot of selfishness again. Then we just went through COVID, and now people are fearful and anxious. And one of the reasons why I'm speaking of mental health is we don't have enough support around mental health. But he's speaking of something that's free for you to step you out of your spiritual and step you more into a higher self, right? So what does that get to look like for each and every one of you that listen to this? Because your life is right now. And every day your life is aging, however aging looks like for you. Or you could be like Daniel and be like, I don't have that exhaustion because I've stepped into myself and I've taken care of myself. And he's spoken of his story several times on our platform of where he came from and where he is now. But he chose to completely step out of the box and step into the life he's living right now.
Hallelujah. Well said.
Hallelujah. So you just like bring so much energy and just so much like such a true guiding light to the world. And I'm just grateful for like how you show up. Like we both have shared on showing up for one another. And I know you were like, yes, let me give something free so that people can hear my energy and so that you can get on, Daniel's email list so you can get his amazing emails. Like I get his emails and I read through and I'm like, wow, like these are the people that are going to take us to the next level in life because they're speaking empowerment, they're speaking energy, they're not speaking negativity. So if you want to talk really briefly about the gift that you've given, and I can type it in here and it's also in your emails and it also will be with a video as well. and speak a little bit about that. That would be fantastic before we close.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, I'll step back to what you said a moment ago. It's true. I didn't start by living a vibrant life. I grew up in a lower middle class family, fat, sick, and depressed. And what I learned is that to create a vibrant life, it takes some intention, it takes some effort, it takes some knowledge. So in 30 years now of being devoted to that, what I've done and what this gift is a little guide to vibrant living. And I say little as in it's short, and and not little in terms of its effects. And so it's a guide to vibrant living with suggestions that some of which you might know, but what I do with the guide is help you to go deeper with it, with a little bit of video training also on how to implement what you might know so that it actually gets you more benefit in your life. And it's easy to find, easy to get. It's just on my website, danielaaron.com/tips, TIPS. And yeah, and it's great if you do join me and get the communications that I share. The good news, the join the Vibe tribe, because we're all bringing our vibe up. I'm also about to release some new free guided audio breath sessions too. So love for you to be in touch so that you can get that as well.
No free audio breath sessions. And then you are stepping out as well, so more people can hear your voices and whatnot online, correct? For interviewing as well. You're stepping into podcasting. Am I saying it right? Everybody does it so differently, but you're stepping into bringing energy and amazing voices and leaders that are resonating with you that you're interviewing. So that's your next journey.
Yeah, thank you. Nicely said. It's yeah, we call it a live video show. It's called The Art of Vibrant Living. And it's a podcast, live video show. Technically podcast, what I understand is audio only, although we do release the audio versions only too. Yeah, the art of vibrant living show.com is the URL for that. And you can see the past shows, the people that I'm interviewing that are coming up. Hopefully Dr. Holly will be with us on there one day soon. We've got some amazing guests already lined up, and that airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Hawaii. So what's that? 5 p.m. Eastern currently.
Yep, 5 p.m. right now, and then it'll be 6 p.m. once we've flipped the clocks, fall behind. So I really appreciate you. And if everybody that is listening, like what we can do now from a distance is stop today and say a prayer for those in Maui that need your love, need your support, because I'm sure Daniel's not only working like early mornings into the late evenings so that he can support his loved ones. And the best that we can do, if we have no other way to support with finances or gifts or whatever, we can always have massive prayers for those that are really, I don't love the word, but that are suffering right now and really have like lost everything in their life, and maybe not even material things, but may have really lost a loved one. So if everybody could take a breath today after they listen to this or whenever they listen to this and send love and heartfelt prayers to those in Maui and to Daniel's loved ones and his friends who have really been like uprooted in their life. And I'm just grateful that nothing has happened to you, because I wasn't sure about this interview, but I'm just glad you're safe and well. And now it's like bootstraps on the ground to support others, I'm sure, for you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, I just recorded a video that I released on YouTube yesterday to kind of explain some of what's going on. And I said exactly the same as you. If people want to donate, great. There are reputable sources, and that money can help. And prayer and wishing well, it actually does mean something. It really is helpful. And, everything that you described about what's going on here is accurate. And there are people still that don't know if their loved ones are alive or dead. And so, it's very much an active disaster situation here now. So the prayers really do mean a lot. So thank you for inviting that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to thank you so much again for showing up and, welcoming you to our show. And our doors are always open. And do please reach out to Daniel, get into the Art of Vibrant Living, his new podcast, grab his freebie and hear his heart and his energy, because he does want to share his knowledge and what he's created and his growth that he's gone through. So I just want to thank you so much. And I appreciate you being here and just continuing to do what you do in this world.
Well, thank you, Holly, and likewise, right back to you, because you're tirelessly putting out great information, inspiring people. You're such a beautiful person and leader in what you're doing, and we're very grateful and lucky to have you in the world doing that.
Thank you so much. I receive, and I want to thank all of you that are here now that have, showed up to Health Mastery for Leaders, the online live doc show. As you know, we have interviews throughout the month. This month is mental wellness and anxiety. And, check your inboxes when we send emails out to the speakers that are coming up. And I send so much love, light, and joy to all of you, and a big heartfelt prayer to Maui right now. So thank you so much, and have a beautiful, beautiful day, everybody.